At long last, we finally get to talk about computer-generated imagery in the motion picture, and when it begins, what the timeline of the major developments and landmark films are in it, so that we can figure out kind of how we got to now, where, as Jay Hoberman argues, really the history of film might be more accurately called the history of animation. So when's it begin? Well, earlier than you think. Here's a movie called Hummingbird that was done as an animation example of what a computer could do. And so this film is fairly simple, but you get a sense of how the computer takes something that looks hand-drawn and then suddenly is able to manipulate it in a way that a 2D animated film might be unable to do. So 1967, we get the birth of CGI. After that, we get a film like Westworld, where the robot's point of view is the computer-generated imagery here. This right here, this pixelated vision, is done on a computer to make to make it look like what a computer or a robot would see. Now, it's important to notice here how this is the approach to computer-generated imagery in movies for quite a while is that it's separate. It's not integrated with the action. Then we have the wireframe technology that appears in The Black Hole and in Star Wars: A New Hope, where the animation is kind of giving us a tour through the model, the grids of different things. Again, still not integrating it with actors, but these are big developments. So you see a lot of kind of the computer screens in movies become those sorts of displays are going to be created on computers rather than elsewhere. And the big one, the one that really was touting itself as being the most developed and exciting, you get a movie like Tron, which just want y'all to enjoy that for a second. But Tron was supposed to be a big step forward. The storyline is about someone, is taking place inside a computer. But the issue here with this big sequence near the end is that the movie was not financially successful, and people speculate that its failure at the box office set the development of CGI back many years. And now it's kind of got a retro cool thing to it, but at the time it was it sort of made people scared to go all in on computer generated imagery and stick to what they knew. But it's cool. Then you have this movie, The Last Starfighter, that comes out in 1984. And similar to Tron, the plot of this one is that this kid's really good at this one particular video game that turns out to be real. And the species that's in that video game comes and gets him to protect them. So it's basically like Galaxy Quest, but about a gamer rather than the cast of a television show. But The Last Starfighter is important in that this film features the first time that computer-generated imagery is integrated with actors. So we have the blend of CGI and live action, where all films previous to this one are going to have them separated, right? Where it's always a cutaway or something like that. Last Starfighter manages to put them together. I watched this movie countless times when I was in grade school. I don't know whether any of you have seen it. I have no idea if it is worth seeing now, but I can tell you that 5- and 6-year-old me thought this was the greatest motion picture ever made. Then we go to a movie whose CGI, maybe of the first of the ones that we're seeing, really holds up. This is Young Sherlock Holmes from 1985. Check this out. Oh, goodness. I am so sorry. redo that. Okay, now we get to some good stuff of a scene of CGI that probably seems less dated than the others. Get ready for this. It's young Sherlock Holmes. And the next shot is the real flex. Look at this. What? Okay, so the thing that makes this in Young Sherlock Holmes so special is this is the first use of computer-generated imagery to do something even remotely anthropomorphic. And he is as blown away by what he's seen as we are. And so they've got the advantage here of a stained glass window is automatically going to be flat and two-dimensional, so that makes the animation a little bit easier to sell, but then it's also in the shape of a person doing person-like stuff. This is a big leap forward. It's also just a completely badass scene. It's really cool. I don't know if it holds up right here for you. I can tell you last year when I showed this movie to my at the time, 10 and 8-year-old, they were blown away. So next, we get, of course, the world of Pixar with Tin Toy. This one would be the first time that we get a film made on a computer that wins an Academy Award. So I know that the animation for this may not be super duper impressive by Pixar's standards today, but Best Animated Short, 1988. And not gonna lie, this I would put this in the top 10 of Pixar movies ever made. This is a fantastic film driven largely by a phenomenal script for this short film. But this is Tin Toy, and it will also set up some things in Toy Story that we'll get to later on. So then we go for the kind of morphine stuff that we see from James Cameron in The Abyss here, where now the computer-generated imagery is able to have something morph into something else. So the shape-shifting quality of the alien in The Abyss, and then the morphing of the Grail face melting stuff in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade becomes the new standard. And this stuff is, especially in The Abyss, is pretty remarkable even for now, where you have the water effect here that then morphs into the shape of something else. So this is animation that transforms. It's pretty wild. And in The Last Crusade, it's a face melting thing, or the growth. And so this morphing from, what was the kind of face melting in the Ark of the Covenant scene at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark becomes a little more sophisticated 8 years later in The Last Crusade. And then all of that, those two developments make possible the morphing in Terminator 2 Judgment Day, which is some pretty impressive integration of CGI with live action, where now the morphing is not just morphing from one shape into another. Oh, dude, that's so good. Is now going to be able to transform into an actor as well. So here we see the evil T-1000 can morph into anything, into this kind of mercury looking substance, and then that can transform into a person right before our eyes. Yeah, and so you have this kind of stuff. Here we go. What? Oh, that's good. Oh, and the little gag that, oh, look, it's... So, yeah, and then you heard of this movie? It's this little indie film by this kid Spielberg. And Jurassic Park is noted as a triumph in computer-generated imagery, which it is, but also it's a significant blend of animatronic puppetry and things like that. It's using every technique available in Jurassic Park. But the size of the impact of this movie, it's a monster hit, right? And after Jurassic Park, there's kind of no going back for the level of sophistication that we're going to get here. It just keeps getting more and more. Here is an interesting milestone: is the 1994 movie The Crow, which the first here is this is the first time that that computer generated imagery was used in a movie to replace an actor who couldn't be there anymore. You see, Brandon Lee dies during production of The Crow. A mishap with a stunt pistol. There's something lodged in the chamber of the pistol that they're using to shoot his character, and it strikes him and hits him in the abdomen and kills him. And they still had 2 or 3 weeks of shooting left, and they used CGI to basically put his face onto the stunt double for a few scenes in order to finish the movie. And that's the first time that we have that happening in a film. This happens quite frequently now, not always to sort of resurrect a dead actor, but to, do face swaps and things like that. Now, of course, Toy Story, the first feature-length movie made entirely on a computer, and it's a classic. It's wonderful. And the Pixar juggernaut is born. And then we have this movie. Trigger warning. There's Jar Jar. Here we have a fully CGI character interacting with live action people. And that's the big deal with this movie, and what makes The Phantom Menace. It's what makes The Phantom Menace special. And then Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow is maybe a movie that you might not have heard of. This one is live action actors acting in front of a completely computer generated environment. And so the whole movie is basically actors in front of green screens reacting to things that aren't there. So where you had Liam Neeson acting with a co-star who wasn't actually there, now we have actors basically just interacting only with some of their props, and everything else is being created later. So it's an animated movie with live people in it, which is this movie was not a financial success, and had it been, we probably would see a lot more of this. And then the next big leap forward is something like motion capture, which is all over, virtually in every movie at this point, where you can have an animated character driven entirely by a human performance. In the case of Gollum in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, or this kind of hybrid of motion capture by putting one actor's face onto the body of another, like we get in The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. And these two films are also interesting in the conversations that they provoke about us having to maybe reconsider how we define screen acting. There was a lot of talk during the Oscar campaigns for Lord of the Rings, wondering if Andy Serkis would receive an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor for his portrayal of Gollum, because his performance was seen as a major step forward in kind of the emotional impact of an animated character, right? We're only a couple years after Jar Jar Binks, where you had that character inspiring hatred from so many people, and here people walking out of The Two Towers or Return of the King thinking that Gollum was like the most relatable and identifiable character who delivered the most moving performance in the movie. And people talked about whether that should be eligible for acting awards. None of them came to pass, but Andy Serkis has only gone on to do more things like that. Consequently, Brad Pitt did receive a nomination for Best Actor in The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, but the question becomes, what constitutes the performance? Because here we have, that's his face, that's not his body. So is he acting in this scene, right? Whose performance are we judging here? That kind of stuff becomes increasingly interesting when we talk about screen acting. Now, generally, the way that the Academy has dealt with this is that the movies that are pretty CGI heavy in terms of performances and stuff like that are generally not the kinds of movies that get nominated for acting awards. Benjamin Button is the outlier in that, but nevertheless, it is something eventually where we might be having to have that debate about an entirely digital performance competing against live action actors for the same award. But that's just a bit of where we're at right now, where all of this stuff is ultimately, as Jay Hoberman talks about, culminating in us having to question whether or not this art form is actually about representing the real, or if it is and has always been animation.